Today is day 2 for the Come Follow Me study for this week, March 23rd through the 29th. I have remembered my covenant. Exodus 1 through 6. Tuesday, March 24th, 2026, Exodus 2. Moses is born to Levite parents. Both the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible and the Book of Mormon show that as early as the time of Joseph, son of Jacob, the future mission of the deliverer had been prophesied. So detailed had been the prophecy by Joseph that even the name of Moses was known, as well as incidents of his ministry. Exodus 2:1. And there went a man of the house of Levi, and took to wife a daughter of Levi. Moses was a descendant of Levi through both his father Amram and his mother Jochebed. Exodus 2:2. And the woman conceived. Josephus said, a man whose name was Amram, one of the nobler sort of the Hebrews, was afraid for his wife being then with child. He knew not what to do. Hereupon he betook himself to prayer to God, and entreated him to have compassion. Accordingly God had mercy on him, and was moved by his supplication. He stood by him in his sleep, and exhorted him not to despair of his future favors. He said further that he did not forget their piety towards him, and would always reward them for it, as he had formerly granted his favor to their forefathers. Know therefore that I shall provide for you all in common what is for your good, and particularly for thyself what shall make thee famous. For this child of thine shall be concealed from those who watch to destroy him, and when he is brought up in a surprising way, he shall deliver the Hebrew nation from the distress they are under from the Egyptians. His memory shall be famous while the world lasts, and this not only among the Hebrews, but foreigners also. All which shall be the effort of my favor to thee, and to thy posterity. He shall also have such a brother, that he shall himself obtain my priesthood, and his posterity shall have it after him to the end of the world. When the vision had informed him of these things, Amram awakened and told it to Jochebed, who was his wife. And now the fear increased upon them on account of the prediction of Amram's dream, for they were under concern, not only for the child, but on account of the great happiness that was to come to him also. Exodus 2:2 continued. And bare a son, and when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. Josephus continued. However, the mother's labor was not known to those that watched her, by the easiness of her pains, and because the throes of her delivery did not fall upon her with violence. And now they nourished the child at home privately for 3 months. But after that time Amram, fearing he should be discovered, and by falling under the king's displeasure, both he and his child should perish, and so he should make the promise of God of none effect, he determined rather to trust the safety and care of the child to God, than to depend on his own concealment of him. Exodus 2:3-4. And when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes, and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein. And she laid in it the flags of the river's brink. And his sister stood afar off, to wit what would be done to him. Exodus 2:5-8. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, This is one of the Hebrews' children. Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and call to thee a nurse for the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. Josephus said, Thermuthis was the king's daughter. She was now diverting herself by the banks of the river, and seeing a cradle borne along by the current, she sent some that could swim, and bid them bring the cradle to her. When those that were sent on this errand came to her with the cradle, and she saw the little child, she was greatly in love with it, on account of its largeness and beauty. For God had taken such great care in the formation of Moses. Thermuthis bid them bring her a woman that might afford her breast to the child. Yet would not the child admit of her breast, but turned away from it, and did the like to many other women. Now Miriam was, by when this happened, not to appear to be there on purpose, but only as staying to see the child. And she said, It is in vain that thou, O queen, callest for these women for the nourishing of the child, who are no way of kin to it. But still, if thou wilt order one of the Hebrew women to be brought, perhaps it may admit the breast of one of its own nation. Now, since she seemed to speak well, Thermuthis bid her procure such a one, and to bring one of those Hebrew women that gave suck. So, when she had such authority given her, she came back and brought the mother, who was known to nobody there. And now the child gladly admitted the breast, and seemed to stick close to it. And so it was that at the queen's desire the nursing of the child was entirely entrusted to the mother. Exodus 2:9. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, Take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. What impresses you about the women described in Exodus 1-2? How did they help fulfill God's plan for his people? What do their efforts teach you about service in God's work? Exodus 2:10. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses. And she said, Because I drew him out of the water. Josephus said, Hereupon it was that Thermuthis imposed his name Moses upon him, from what had happened when he was put into the river. For the Egyptians call water by the name of Mo, and such as were saved out of it by the name of Usis. So by putting these two words together, they imposed this name upon him. In the New Testament, Stephen made a lengthy speech about the dealings of the Lord with the house of Israel. Concerning Moses' youth, Stephen related, And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and in deeds. Josephus said that Moses was a very handsome and educated prince, and a mighty warrior in the cause of the Egyptians. As a prince, Moses may have had access to the royal libraries of the Egyptians, as well as the scriptural record of the Israelites as taught by his mother. Quite possibly he read the prophecies of Joseph and was led by the Spirit to understand his divine appointment to deliver his brethren the Israelites. Stephen's address implied that Moses understood his responsibility. And when he was fully 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brethren the children of Israel. For he supposed his brethren would have understood how that God by his hand would deliver them. But they understood not. Paul in Hebrews added further to the concept. By faith, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt. Moses' mother Jochebed likely taught him the principles and righteous traditions of the Hebrews as she nursed and cared for him. Josephus said, Now Moses' understanding became superior to his age, nay, far beyond that standard. And when he was taught, he discovered greater quickness of apprehension than was usual at his age, and his actions at that time promised greater. When he should come to the age of a man, God did also give him that tallness, when he was but 3 years old. And as for his beauty, there was nobody so unpolite as when they saw Moses. They were not greatly surprised at the beauty of his countenance. Nay, it happened frequently that those that met him, as he was carried along the road, were obliged to turn again upon seeing the child, that they left what they were about, and stood still a great while to look on him. For the beauty of the child was so remarkable, and natural to him on many accounts, that it detained the spectators, and made them stay longer to look upon him. Brian Richards said, in summary, Moses was a bright and beautiful child. His Egyptian mother brought him before her father Pharaoh as a possible heir to his throne. He was raised by Thermuthis, an Egyptian, but still identified with the Hebrews. He became the general of the Egyptian army in a battle against the Ethiopians, who had made an incursion into Egypt. The Egyptian oracles and sages recommended Moses lead the army, and the Pharaoh agreed. Moses was able to engineer a surprise attack on the Ethiopians, who expected him to travel by water. Instead, he took his army through snake-infested lands, carrying snake-eating birds called ibis that allowed the army to pass safely. As general, he beat the Ethiopians and drove them back into their lands. His success raised the suspicions of the oracles and Pharaoh. Moses slays an Egyptian in defense of an Israelite. Exodus 2:11-12. And it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens. And he spied an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren. And he looked this way and that way. And when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Smote and slew in King James English are both translated from Hebrew naka, meaning to beat down. It is the word used in describing the action taken by soldiers in combat against each other. This suggests that the Hebrew slave's life was truly in danger. It would be correct to say that Moses slew a man who was slaying another, or took a life in saving a life. His looking this way and that before doing so simply indicates that he was aware that the Egyptians would not condone his defense of a slave. Elder Marky Peterson said, however, the historian Eusebius says that the slaying was the result of a court intrigue in which certain men plotted to assassinate Moses. In the encounter, it is said that Moses successfully warded off the attacker and killed him. In the Midrash Rabbah, the traditional Jewish commentary on the Old Testament, it is asserted that Moses, with his bare fists, killed an Egyptian taskmaster who was in the act of seducing a Hebrew woman. This is confirmed in the Quran. Certainly there must have been good reason for Moses' act, and most assuredly the Lord would not have called a murderer to the high office of prophet and liberator for his people Israel. Since he was acting in defense, Moses was not guilty of murder. Exodus 2:13-14. And when they went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together. And he said to him that did the wrong, wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? And he said, who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me, as thou killedst the Egyptian? And Moses feared and said, surely this thing is known. Moses flees to Midian. Exodus 2:15-18. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh, and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water, and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them, and watered their flock. And when they came to Reuel their father, he said, how is it that ye are come so soon today? Jethro, also known as Reuel, was the high priest of Midian, a region to the east of Egypt. As a Midianite, Jethro was a descendant of Abraham and Keturah, through their son Midian. Moses married Zipporah, one of Jethro's daughters. From Latter-day Scripture we learn that Jethro received the priesthood through the lineage of Abraham, and that he conferred the priesthood upon Moses. President Joseph Fielding Smith said the Midianites were descendants of Abraham through the children of Keturah, wife of Abraham. Therefore, the Midianites, who were neighbors to the Israelites in Palestine, were related to the Israelites and were Hebrews. As descendants of Abraham, they were entitled through their faithfulness to his blessings. And in the days of Moses and preceding them, in Midian, the priesthood was found. Elder Erastus Snow said, Midian was the son of Abraham. By his wife Keturah, he and his posterity peopled the land, which was called after his name, and Jethro, being the 5th in regular descent from Midian, lived in the days of Moses, and was priest of the Most High God, when Moses was a young man, 40 years before God called him to lead Israel from Egypt. Moses married Jethro's daughter and lived with him about 40 years, and then God sent him to lead Israel out of Egypt. And we are told in the 18th chapter of Exodus that after Moses had brought Israel into the wilderness, Jethro came to them and praised God among them, and offered sacrifices, and set in order all the officers in Israel, and gave Moses commandments how to proceed. And all this was long before Aaron and his sons were consecrated to the priest's office. Elder John A. Whitsoe said, Moses received the priesthood from Jethro in Midian, and the descent of the priesthood from Abraham to Jethro is given in names that do not appear at that period in the Bible, but is given in the Doctrine and Covenants. Doctrine and Covenants 84. And the sons of Moses according to the holy priesthood which he received under the hand of his father-in-law Jethro. And Jethro received it under the hand of Caleb. And Caleb received it under the hand of Elihu. And Elihu under the hand of Jeremy. And Jeremy under the hand of Gad. And Gad under the hand of Isaias. And Isaias received it under the hand of God. Isaias also lived in the days of Abraham, and was blessed of him. Which Abraham received the priesthood from Melchizedek, who received it through the lineage of his fathers even till Noah, and from Noah till Enoch, through the lineage of their fathers, and from Enoch to Abel, who was slain by the conspiracy of his brother, who received the priesthood by the commandments of God, by the hand of his father Adam, who was the first man. Exodus 2:19. And they said, An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us, and watered the flock. Brian Richard said Moses looked like an Egyptian, but he was a Hebrew. Hebrew on the inside, Egyptian on the outside. We see Moses as the judge of right and wrong in his own world. He wants to rectify the abuse of a fellow Hebrew. He wants to be a peacemaker between two quarreling Hebrews, and he won't stand for the mistreatment of the daughters of Jethro. His natural tendency is to be a judge and make things right. Both qualities would follow him throughout his ministry. Exodus 2:20. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses Zipporah, his daughter. And she bare him a son, and he called his name Gershom. For he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. Israel in bondage cries to the Lord. Exodus 2:23. And it came to pass in process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of the bondage. And they cried, and their cry came up unto God by reason of the bondage. Acts 7:30 indicates that the process of time described here was another 40 years. And when 40 years were expired, there appeared to him in the wilderness of Mount Sinai an angel of the Lord, in a flame of fire in a bush. Exodus 2:24-25. And God heard their groans, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them. The Lord made remarkable promises through his covenants with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Among these promises were that kings and nations would descend from Abraham, that all the nations of the earth would be blessed through his seed, and that Abraham and his descendants would receive the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession. The Lord also promised Abraham that although his descendants would one day be enslaved in a land that is not theirs, they would ultimately come out with great substance. After centuries of enslavement in Egypt, it might have been easy for the Israelites to feel that God had forgotten them. But Exodus 2:24 reminds us that God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. The Lord will always honor his covenants with his people.